Hi, I'm Elowen. And when I came back from a business trip, I found my suitcase sitting on the sidewalk, like I'd been evicted from my own life. There was a note taped to the handle. Your 12% is packed. We voted. No one called. No one warned me. Just locks changed, Wi-Fi renamed, and silence where family used to be. They said I didn't belong, that I was just passing through. But what hurts more than being pushed out is realizing they planned it while smiling to my face. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't just about the house. What else had they erased while I wasn't looking? The car pulled away just as the wind picked up, brushing a damp chill across my skin. I stood there, on the curb of my own street in Asheville, North Carolina, my overnight bag still slung over one shoulder, and stared at something I didn't understand. At first, a suitcase. My suitcase, sitting neatly by the edge of my front yard, like a package someone didn't want anymore. It took me 3 full seconds to believe what I was seeing. I walked closer, slow, deliberate, like my brain needed time to catch up. The suitcase was mine, the same one I packed for the Charlotte trip 3 days ago. And then I saw it. A folded piece of paper, tucked perfectly beneath the handle like it had been waiting there. My name wasn't on it, but I didn't need a signature. I recognized the handwriting. Your 12% is packed. We voted. Respect the majority. My knees almost gave out. For a moment, I thought I might be dreaming, or hallucinating from exhaustion. But the slight drizzle in the air, the chill in my fingertips, the scrape of the suitcase wheels against the sidewalk when I nudged it, all of it was real. Too real. I wheeled it to the front steps, tried the door. Locked. That's when the dread truly settled. I moved around to the side gate, the one connected to the garage. Also locked. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone and opened the smart lock app, something I paid for, by the way. A red banner flashed across the screen. Access revoked. I blinked hard. Tried the Wi-Fi network out of reflex. The name had been changed. Only owners, 5G. I stood on my own property, rained on, and digitally exiled. A part of me wanted to laugh, but it didn't come. Just this heaviness, like the roof I helped repair, had finally collapsed in slow motion, right on top of me. A neighbor walked by, a man who used to wave at me when I mowed the lawn in old sweatpants and bad hair days. He looked at the suitcase, then at me, then gave a quick nod and kept going. Another car passed slowly. No one rolled down their window. No one asked if I was okay. And I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I sat down right there on the damp concrete. My suitcase beside me, the paper still clutched in one hand, wrinkled from how tightly I was gripping it. I didn't feel the cold anymore. Just this burn in my chest, like someone had hollowed it out and replaced my heart with a brick. I thought back to my last conversation with Vera before the trip. She'd been cool, polite, and vaguely formal. You know, Elle, we should start thinking realistically about the house. It's not a museum. Back then, I thought it was just her being efficient. Sensible, even. I'd laughed it off and changed the subject. Now that line was a knife in my memory. Was this all decided while I was gone? Did they talk about me over coffee, plan my removal, in the same breath they argued about who would take the antique dresser? I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. I didn't bang on the door. I didn't scream or shout. What would have been the point? They knew exactly what they'd done, and I wasn't about to give them a reaction that fit their version of me, the emotional one, the dramatic little sister who never really lived here anyway. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my suitcase handle, and walked back toward the street. I dialed Susan. She answered after one ring. Elle? I need a place to stay. You got it. Give me 15. Want wine? And maybe a lawyer's number. There was a pause, then. Red or white? I managed the smallest smile. Surprise me. I rolled the suitcase to the edge of the street and stood there until her car came into view. It felt like being rescued from a shipwreck no one even knew I'd been drowning in. What they didn't understand, what they never really saw, was that I don't shatter. I recalculate. Susan's porch was quiet that morning, except for the soft hum of cicadas warming into the day. I sat there with a mug of coffee she'd handed me without asking questions. That's one of the reasons I've always trusted her. She doesn't prod. She waits for the truth to arrive on its own terms. I hadn't slept much. The couch was comfortable enough, but my mind kept replaying the note, the suitcase, the Wi-Fi name. It was all still too surreal. I kept glancing at my phone, not expecting anything, until a message pinged from Zinnia. "We didn't think you'd come back so soon. Hope you're okay." I read it 3 times. No punctuation, no emotion. Just the kind of message someone sends when they're not sure whether they've crossed the line, or hope you won't notice they did. I stared at the words, then locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the table. A breeze passed through the screen door, bringing with it the scent of cut grass and rain-soaked wood. It reminded me that somewhere out there, my home still existed, just not for me. Susan walked by with a laundry basket tucked under one arm. "I probably shouldn't say this," she began, pausing at the door, "but I heard Vera had people over last week. Big family talk or something?" My spine stiffened. "Family talk?" She shrugged. "That's what the grocery clerk told me. Said there were cars lined up down your street." I didn't need a map to see what had happened. A vote, a decision, all made while I was out of town working, trying to build the life they'd now decided I didn't deserve a share of. They hadn't even told me. I walked back inside, mind already spinning. Their language had been shifting for months now, but I hadn't wanted to believe it. Vera had gone from using we to they. Zinnia had stopped sending updates. Mara's school plays had come and gone without an invite. I remembered Vera's phrase, "We just want to handle things fairly." Back then, I thought she meant chores, or maybe the heating bill. Not the house, not history, not blood. They hadn't just made a decision. They'd crafted an exit plan, for me. I opened Susan's laptop. The last folder I had access to was still synced from our family cloud. Photos from Mom. I scrolled through, hoping for distraction. But there, embedded in a screenshot someone had mistakenly saved, was a glimpse of a group chat I'd never seen before. Rhodes Property Logistics. The participants, Vera, Zinnia, even Mara's name was listed. Mine wasn't. One message read, "If she shows up, we'll say we assumed she'd moved on." I stared at those words until they stopped being words and became something else, like noise in my chest, ringing under my ribs. I needed air. I grabbed my keys and left without telling Susan where I was going. I drove to a cafe I used to like, parked in the farthest spot from the door, and sat in my car for nearly an hour. I didn't cry. I scrolled through my inbox, looking for anything that might tell me this wasn't deliberate. Then I saw it. A calendar invite from Vera, dated 2 weeks ago. The title read, "House Logistics, Preliminary Vote." My name was on the original recipient list, but it had been marked as canceled just 10 minutes after being sent. I checked the edit history. The cancellation came from Vera's email. There it was. Quiet, clean, calculated. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who'd just been challenged to prove her place. "They can plan without me," I whispered to no one. "I'll respond without warning, too." Back at Susan's, I logged into my work email. It felt grounding to type something with purpose. I wrote a quick note to my financial assistant. Pull mortgage and repair receipts from the last 6 years. Include anything under my name or any transfer requests. I want itemized summaries by Friday. I hit send and leaned back in the chair. The sting hadn't gone away, but the ache had turned into something sharper. I wasn't just hurt, I was awake, and I had no intention of being erased quietly. I parked a block away from the house and waited. There was no sign of Vera's car or Zinnia's, and that's exactly what I was counting on. The air was still, thick with late morning humidity. As I walked down the driveway I once helped lay with Dad one summer, sweating through my t-shirt and learning how to mix concrete in just the right way. That was the first time I ever felt like a builder of something real. I still remembered the override code for the garage. Vera must have forgotten to reset it. The keypad blinked green. The door clicked. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something had changed. The house felt colder, not from temperature, but from intent, like a place holding its breath, waiting for someone to leave again. I walked slowly down the hallway, noticing frames had been shifted. My high school graduation photo was gone from the wall. The shelf that once held my dance recital picture now displayed a candle holder I didn't recognize. I paused in front of what used to be our shared family portrait. It was still there, but cropped. The version where I stood in the middle had been replaced with one from later years. One without me. That was when I stopped looking. I already knew what I'd find. I headed to the basement. The storage room door creaked like it hadn't been opened in weeks. I flipped on the single overhead bulb and saw them. 4 large cardboard boxes, sealed with packing tape, marked in Vera's handwriting. Black Sharpie, no emotion. Non-essentials, Elowin's stuff. I crouched and peeled open the nearest box. Inside were photo albums, 1 missing pages. My college diploma, bent. A certificate from the Chamber of Commerce, water-stained. And a card, one Mom had written for my 30th birthday. Torn clean down the middle. The signature still there in blue ink, though. Love always, Mom. I sat back on my heels. This wasn't about making space. It was about making absence. Back upstairs, I pulled out my laptop and connected to my mobile hotspot. My fingers moved automatically, opening folders, pulling receipts. I found it quickly. Payment for $18,200. The roofing company invoice, dated 2019, when we had that bad storm, and the entire back half of the shingles had to be replaced. The bank transfer had come from my personal account. I'd taken on that expense without argument, knowing the family was stretched after Dad's funeral. I also found Vera's reply, dated just 2 days later. We'll repay you as soon as the inheritance clears. Thank you for handling it. I printed both documents at Susan's the day after. The paper felt heavier than it was. A quiet, undeniable fact. Not drama, not memory, just proof. Back in the basement, I sat on an overturned paint bucket. My fingers brushed the rough floor. I remembered helping Dad lay these wooden boards when I was 15. He taught me how to use a level, told me straight lines matter. People can lie, foundations can't. I didn't know I was crying until a drop hit my jeans. For years, I had lived like a guest in this house, tidying up, contributing quietly, leaving space for everyone else's noise. I never insisted on my name on the deed. I trusted family meant more than signatures. Clearly, I'd miscalculated. The light above me flickered once. I looked around and realized I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt clear. I grabbed my phone and dialed Henrietta Clark. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Ilawan? Hey, Henrietta. Do you remember when the back stairs rotted out in 2020? Course I do, she said. Nearly broke my hip slipping down them. Do you remember who fixed them? You did. Had your tool belt and everything. Took you all weekend. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Would you be willing to write that down for me? Is this about the girls? It is. Her tone shifted. I'll do it. Bring me a notepad, and I'll sign it. Thank you. I hung up and sat in the dark basement another few minutes. I wasn't reminiscing anymore. I was documenting. And this time, every missing picture, every torn card, every dollar would count. It was nearly noon when the email from my assistant landed in my inbox. Subject line, "You'll want to see this." I clicked it with a sense of reluctance, like opening a box I already knew was filled with something I didn't want to face. Attached was a forwarded message, one from my father, dated 2 months before he passed. The header read, "In case I'm gone." It had been sent to Vera and Zinnia. I hadn't been copied. The contents were short, but the weight of it hit me harder than any insult they could have thrown my way. Please don't sell the house. Let Elowen keep it if she wants. She's the one who'll protect its meaning. I read it in Susan's kitchen, where the sunlight through the window made everything seem gentler than it really was. My hands didn't shake from anger. They trembled from confirmation. All those years I'd questioned if Dad had seen me, if he noticed who stayed up repainting the trim, who showed up when no one else did. He had. He just hadn't said it loud enough for the others to hear. Or maybe they had heard and chose to ignore it. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with the lawyer our family had used for years, Mr. Greeley. He had handled my parents' wills, the property titles, all of it. I needed clarity, or maybe just documentation. When I arrived at his office downtown, the receptionist tilted her head slightly. "Oh, Ms. Ridge, didn't they tell you? Your sisters were here yesterday morning. They met with Mr. Greeley. Brief meeting." I paused, just long enough to breathe in the sour feeling of déjà vu. "No," I replied calmly. "They didn't tell me." The receptionist gave me the kind of smile people offer when they know something isn't right, but can't do anything about it. I left without going upstairs. I sat in my car, watching people hustle by with coffee and phones glued to their ears. The world kept turning while my sisters met privately to rewrite the past. I texted Vera. "I know about Dad's email and the lawyer meeting. We need to talk." No reply. Zinnia responded instead. "Let's not make this dramatic." Dramatic. As if quietly erasing someone from a family's legacy wasn't the theatrical act here. I didn't answer either of them. An hour later, as fate would have it, I spotted both of them walking out of a cafe near the courthouse. Vera was laughing about something, Zinnia listening like she always did, half agreement, half apology. I crossed the street before I could second-guess myself. They saw me a few steps before I reached them. Vera's mouth tightened. Zinnia blinked fast, like she might turn around and disappear. I stopped in front of them. "You had no right," I said evenly, "to erase my name from this house." Vera opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Dad chose me, even if you pretend he didn't." She folded her arms. "That wasn't legal. It wasn't part of the will." "No," I agreed, "but it was real, and real is about to get legal." Zinnia looked away. Vera's face stayed still, practiced. I turned without another word. That night, I spread every document I had across the table at my rental. Roof repair invoices, paint purchase receipts, digital transfers, emails from Dad, Henrietta's notarized statement. The house had history, and I had proof I was part of it. I sent an email to Noah Wexler, a lawyer I knew through work. Subject: request for legal consultation. Body: I'm being pushed out of my family's home by people who know exactly what they're doing. I'm not letting them bulldoze me out of my own life. Are you available this week? He replied 2 hours later. Let's set up a time. You have a strong position. Later that evening, I sat alone in a corner of the library. The teen section buzzed with soft chatter and shuffling notebooks. I watched a girl who looked no older than 15 adjust her glasses and settle into a seat, flipping through a heavy textbook. That used to be me. Quiet, supportive, staying out of the way. This time, I would take up space. I wouldn't shout, but I wouldn't stay silent either. The next morning started like most others now. Quiet, with a sense of waiting. The rental smelled faintly of stale coffee and wood cleaner. I moved slower than usual, trying to ground myself before opening the mail Susan had picked up from the old address. There was an envelope among the usual stack of forwarded bank statements and local ads. Thicker paper. My name handwritten in a familiar, almost careless loop. I tore it open without thinking, but the flap had already been ripped and taped over, sloppily. There were fingerprints smudged faintly across the edges. Inside was a mortgage notice, not to me, but referencing my father's property and a request to update ownership contact information, sent to Vera, not me. Not shared, not discussed, not even copied. So they weren't just trying to push me out emotionally, they were maneuvering, legally, behind my back. An hour later, I got an email. It came through my personal account, but it had that tone. Cold, efficient, impersonal. The kind of email HR sends when you violated a policy you didn't know existed. If you continue contacting third parties or disrupting intended sale negotiations, legal action may be initiated. It was CC'd to Vera's lawyer. I stared at the screen and didn't move for a full minute. The phrasing struck me harder than the threat. Disrupting! Negotiations. Like I was a hostile outsider, not their sister, not the daughter who stayed behind to fix gutters and pay overdue taxes when everyone else left town. I forwarded the message to Noah with one sentence. We need to talk. We met in the small conference room above a bookstore where he leased office space. He wore a navy shirt and kept his sleeves rolled. No tie. But he looked at me with the kind of quiet that meant he wasn't underestimating a thing. They're trying to intimidate you into silence before they even negotiate, he said, after reading both documents. They don't want a sale, I replied. They want a surrender. I slid the opened envelope across the table, letting it speak for itself. He nodded and pulled out a notepad. We discussed timelines, paper trails, whose name appeared where and when. Then I left, less rattled, more resolved. Later that afternoon, I ran into Vera at the grocery store. I wasn't sure whether it was fate or poor timing, but there she was, standing near the self-checkout, punching in produce codes like nothing had happened. I didn't plan to approach her, but my body moved before my mind caught up. I walked right up, and when she turned, her expression didn't even flicker. It was rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for a moment just like this. I received your letter, I said, and the one you opened. She didn't deny it. Of course not. You've pushed me into a legal corner, I continued. And now you're going to see what I do when I stop trying to keep the peace. She exhaled sharply, set down her basket. You're making it personal. It is personal, I said. It's the only home that ever knew my name. We stood there for a breath too long, the low hum of checkout machines underscoring everything. I walked out without waiting for her to reply. Back at the rental, I pulled down a box labeled LON's receipts. Years of documentation, tucked away, dismissed, not anymore. I laid it all out on the kitchen table and began sorting. By date, by amount, by project. My fingers shook a little, but not from fear. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was establishing my foundation. Every invoice, every text confirming I'd go ahead and cover it. Every photo of a repair I'd done or a check I'd deposited, stacked one by one. I didn't need a declaration. I needed a record. That night, after dinner and 2 cups of oversteeped tea, I recorded a voice message to Susan. They wanted to use silence like a weapon, but I know how to use it too, just sharper. I opened the drawer beside the sink and retrieved the printout of Dad's email, his final instruction. I placed it on top of the growing file, like a seal. Then I closed the folder and left it on the table, ready for what came next. I met Henrietta Clark at a modest notary office tucked across from the farmer's market. The kind of place where documents became weapons and truth got its stamp. Henrietta arrived in what she clearly considered her finest. A lavender dress with pearl buttons, gloves tucked neatly into her handbag, and lipstick a shade too defiant for a Wednesday morning. Her hair was pinned into a tight twist that didn't dare move, but it was her eyes, unflinching, resolute, that set the tone. She approached the clerk with purpose and asked for the paperwork. "I'm ready," she said, voice even. No dramatics, no hesitation. She read the letter aloud before signing, slow and deliberate, as if each word carried the weight of a promise. It sounded like scripture, sacred, final. To whom it may concern, I witnessed Elowen Ridge personally maintaining, financing, and protecting her late parents' home for over a decade. Notarized, stamped, real. As we stepped outside, sunlight filtered through the market tents, and children ran between stalls of strawberries and sunflowers. Henrietta linked her arm through mine, just like she used to when I was little, when everything felt solid and fair. "They think silence is safety," she murmured, "but sometimes it's just a delay." She kissed my cheek, nodded once, and walked toward the flower stalls like she had already handed me the torch. When I got back to the rental house, Susan was waiting on the front porch with a cardboard box balanced on her hip. "Found this in Mom's room. It was wedged behind the dresser. Looked more like your kind of thing than Vera's." I carried the box inside. On top sat a small leather-bound journal, the kind Mom used to carry to jot grocery lists and Christmas ideas. The edges were frayed, the spine cracked. It had been slid under and behind too many things for too many years. The first few pages were filled with careful curling script, recipes, household tips, a sewing pattern note. But deeper in, something shifted. Her handwriting grew sharper, the tone more intimate. Less homemaker, more mother. One entry, dated 6 months before her passing, stopped me cold. "If they push Elowen out, I've failed as a mother. She's the only one who never wanted anything back." I didn't cry. Not then. I closed the journal softly, like it might fall apart if I did anything sudden. I placed it beside Henrietta's notarized letter and stood there, absorbing the quiet hum of the house, the way truth doesn't shout. It just sits there, waiting to be seen. Then I got to work. I scanned every page, cleaned the files, added bookmarks. I titled the folder, Proof of Care and Contribution, Exhibit 1. I emailed it to Noah with a single sentence. "They have threats. I have facts." By late afternoon, Vera's next move arrived, as reliably cold as her perfume and as sharp as the click of her heels on floors I paid to repair. Her message read, "If you refuse to cooperate, we will assume abandonment and move forward with the transaction." I didn't flinch. I replied with the scanned documents attached and typed 5 words. "I wouldn't recommend that. Regards, Elowen." Noah responded within minutes. "Got it. Forwarded to the mediator and opposing counsel. We're establishing your stake, in every sense. They won't be able to erase you anymore." I stood in the kitchen after reading his email. Everything felt still. Sunlight sliced through the blinds like lines in a ledger. Tallying, balancing. I recorded a short video on my laptop, but didn't post it. Not yet. I sat at the table in a plain gray t-shirt. No makeup, just me. No edits. No script. I didn't choose to escalate, but I was never going to disappear either. I saved the video to my desktop under the file name. If needed, that night, I poured a mug of lukewarm tea, the way Mom used to when she needed to think but couldn't sit still. I stood in the middle of a rented living room that didn't belong to me, but somehow, everything inside finally felt like mine. Because I'd earned it, defended it, refused to be erased from it. Vera always used silence like a blade, cutting short questions, carving out the pieces of me that made her uncomfortable. She mistook silence for surrender. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is restraint, and mine had run its course. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the family group chat. The last message was from Zinnia, a blurry photo of a lattice-topped pie captioned, "For tomorrow's potluck." I stared at the thread for a long moment. Not out of sentiment, but out of finality. I hovered my thumb, then tapped delete. Gone. And with that, I reclaimed the space they'd tried to push me out of, not just the house, but the narrative. They could keep their threats. I had truth, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I knew something had shifted the moment I saw the chain stretched tight across the iron gate. Not just a lock, but a declaration. This was more than property now. This was personal. It was a line drawn, and I had clearly crossed it. There's a kind of silence in that moment, the kind that makes you understand you've stepped past the point of return. Beside me stood the legal courier, middle-aged, polite, composed. He didn't ask questions, probably wasn't paid enough to care, but his eyes flicked once to my face, to the jaw I was clenching just a little too hard. He held out the envelope. Plain, official. Notice of mediation, Ridge property dispute. I didn't take it yet. I moved to the side gate, tried the latch. Locked. Front entrance, padlocked too. Heavy steel loops. Not just to keep people out. Designed, very specifically, to keep me out. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Vera. Her text was short, precise. "You're not welcome here anymore. That includes couriers." It wasn't an afterthought. It was orchestrated. They knew I was coming. They planned to humiliate me like this. I nodded toward the courier, my voice dry. "Leave it with their attorney. Let the paper speak for me." He gave a respectful nod, turned, and headed back to his car. I stood there alone, outside the house I once considered home, like some stranger loitering on the wrong sidewalk. I didn't linger. I drove straight to Susan's. When I walked through her front door, she was already waiting in the foyer, holding a thick, unmarked envelope. No label, no return address. The kind of delivery only lawyers or liars use. "It just arrived," she said quietly. "Want me to open it?" "No," I told her. "I know what's inside." I peeled the seal back and slid out the contents. 5 pages. Legal formatting, double-spaced, sanitized language, but soaked in dismissal. The kind of document written by someone who thinks power means they never have to say your name again. Page 1. A neat figure typed across the top. $18,000. That was the offer. That was the value they put on closure. In return, recipient agrees to cease all claims, contact, and public discussion of the Ridge property dispute or any associated parties. Silence. For sale. At a discount. I laughed once, dry, bitter. They think I'm a problem they can park like a bill past due. I didn't waste time. I texted Noah, then opened my laptop. I didn't need to draft. I didn't even think. I typed straight from the spine. "Your proposal is rejected. All legal actions will proceed as previously scheduled." Noah replied minutes later. "They're only offering money because they know they're losing. That's not a settlement. That's fear." "It was never about money," I answered. "Not for me." Later that afternoon, I found myself in a small cafe downtown, trying to sift through my inbox and the dust cloud of emotions I hadn't quite processed. I had barely opened my second email when the door chimed. I looked up, and there they were. Vera, Zinnia, just like that. Vera locked eyes with me instantly and started walking over, each step like a closing statement. Zinnia lingered by the entrance, uncertain, her fingers dancing nervously at her sides. Vera's voice cut through the quiet. Low, controlled, dangerous. "You really want to make this ugly," she said. "Go ahead. But when no one in this family ever speaks to you again, remember? You chose this." I closed my laptop slowly, looked up, and stood. "That's funny," I said, tone steady. "I haven't heard from a single one of you since you left my belongings on the sidewalk like a trash pickup." The cafe fell quiet. Not dramatically, just enough. A few forks paused mid-air. A couple leaned slightly closer. The air tightened. Vera's face twitched. Zinnia looked down. "I'm not looking for your forgiveness," I said, "or your approval. I'm here for truth. And whether you like it or not, you're going to see it." From my tote bag, I pulled 2 manila folders and laid them on the corner of their table. One was Henrietta's notarized testimony, the affidavit we'd worked weeks to prepare. The other was an excerpt from our mother's handwritten journal. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I turned and walked out, leaving the weight of proof behind me, like an anchor cut from the boat. Back at Susan's house, the late sunlight filtered across the kitchen table. The kind of light that softens everything except the truth. I poured myself a glass of water. My phone vibrated again. Noah. Mediation hearing confirmed. Next Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Susan glanced over, her voice careful. "You ready for this?" I looked down at the folders, then at the phone still in my hand, then back up, into the quiet certainty of the room. "They burned the bridge," I said. "I'm not trying to cross it. I'm walking on stone now." And with that, I opened my contacts, found Vera's name, deleted it. No second thoughts. No hesitation. Some silences are earned, some are chosen. The mediation office was colder than I expected. Sterile walls, a glass table that reflected every flicker of discomfort. I walked in with Noah, a folder under my arm, and a pulse that didn't betray the war in my chest. Vera, Zinnia, and their lawyer were already seated. Vera didn't look up. Zinnia gave a tight nod that vanished before it meant anything. The mediator, a woman named Colleen, with a calm, steady voice, welcomed us and gestured to the seats. I didn't sit right away. I placed a neatly labeled folder in front of her, then distributed identical copies to everyone at the table. My voice didn't shake. I'd like to begin with something that was never disclosed. Noah opened the folder for effect. Our client was removed from the family's life insurance policy 6 months after her mother's passing, without notification, consent, or discussion. I leaned forward slightly. That wasn't a clerical change. That was an erasure. It wasn't about legality. It was about cutting me out of every legacy. Colleen didn't speak, but her brow furrowed. Vera's attorney cleared his throat, but Noah raised a hand. We're not here to debate emotion. We're here to clarify intent, and the paper trail is clear. I pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. It's a video, I said, of Mara. The screen lit up. My niece's face appeared, tear-streaked, her voice trembling but sure. I miss you, Aunt Elle. Mom says you're dangerous now, but I don't believe her. Gasps. Zinnia covered her mouth. Vera's jaw tightened like stone. Noah didn't miss a beat. Even children can see manipulation when it's that obvious. Zinnia started to speak, but Vera stopped her with a glare. For once, she understood that silence wasn't control. It was exposure. Then I brought out the final pages. Mom's journal, Henrietta's notarized testimony. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. You tried to reduce me to a decimal point, a percentage, but I was the one who kept the roof from caving in, literally and figuratively. I patched the shingles. I paid the contractors. I kept the light bills current when you didn't even know the breaker box had a name. Vera's voice cut in, sharper than ever. You're twisting this. You always do. Colleen lifted her hand. Let her finish. I looked directly at Vera. You can edit the documents, change the locks, but you can't rewrite memory, and you can't cancel the truth. There was a beat of silence. Noah looked at me, then turned to the mediator. That's our position. Vera's lawyer finally spoke, his voice thin. We're prepared to make a final offer, a financial settlement in exchange for full withdrawal from property rights and future claims. I smiled without humor. I'm not here for compensation. I'm here because someone thought they could rewrite our family history and call it strategy. Colleen took her time reviewing everything. The clock ticked louder than the whispers at the table. Then she looked up. Based on the submitted documentation, and in the interest of fair resolution, I recommend that Elowen Ridge retain full legal ownership of the property, and that all attempts to list or transfer said property without her consent be ceased immediately. Noah nodded. We accept. Vera didn't. Her pen scratched the signature line like a knife. She turned to me, her voice low enough to keep from drawing more attention. You broke the family. I looked her in the eye. No, I'm the only one who didn't walk away. The room emptied slowly. Zinnia couldn't meet my gaze. Noah packed the files. Colleen shook my hand. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, but honest. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was how quiet the house felt. Not hollow, but calm. The kind of quiet you get after a storm has passed, when everything broken has already been swept away, and all that's left is the stillness that follows surviving. It was mine now. Not in spirit, not in memory, but on paper. Official. Final. Still, the air carried the scent of lives once tangled together. Old wood, linen, a hint of lemon polish left behind in cabinets no one had opened in months. I walked through slowly, fingers grazing the edges of door frames, the back of a chair. The photos had been rearranged since I'd last been here. Mine were missing. I opened the storage box I'd brought with me and pulled out a frame, my high school portrait. I rehung it on the hallway wall, not in defiance, but in restoration. This house had known me, and now it would remember me again. In the kitchen, I saw the voicemail notification I'd ignored for over a week still blinking. It was from Vera. I almost deleted it without listening, but instead I pressed play. Her voice sounded tired, brittle. "I still think you went too far, but I hope you're happy." That was it, no apology, just the residue of guilt hiding behind accusation. I didn't call back. I spent the rest of the morning walking the rooms. My mother's bedroom was mostly untouched. The quilt I remembered from when I was 15 was still folded at the end of the bed, the same one I used to drag down to the living room when I was sick. I sat beside it for a long while, hands pressed into the fabric, breathing in the silence. Beneath the bed, I found a photograph. Dusty, bent at one corner, but intact. Me and Dad. I didn't cry. I just smiled at the memory and tucked the photo into the top drawer of the nightstand. The knock at the door was light. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was Mara. Zinnia stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed but not hostile. "She just wanted to say goodbye," Zinnia said. "We're moving." Mara walked straight in, no hesitation. She hugged me around the waist like she had when she was 5. "I know you're not the bad guy," she whispered. "Mom says a lot of things, but I know." I crouched to her level and unclasped the small pendant Mom used to wear. I fastened it around Mara's neck. "Keep this, and keep being smart." She nodded, eyes wide and shining. Zinnia didn't speak, just gave a tight nod before leading Mara away. I stood in the doorway for a while after they left, watching the car disappear down the street. Later that day, I sat at my desk and opened my journal, the one that had followed me from place to place for over a decade, but was never quite filled. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Justice doesn't heal you. It just stops the bleeding so you can learn how to walk again." I didn't post anything online. I didn't make a speech or a statement. I simply filed the court documents into a safe, tucked the journal away, and closed the file. That night, Susan and I sat at the overlook near the Blue Ridge trails. The hills rolled like quiet promises beneath the dusk, and a breeze pulled softly at the hem of my sleeve. She handed me a cup of tea. "You did the hard thing." "No," I said. "I did the necessary thing." We didn't speak again for a long while. We didn't need to. Back at the house, the hallway lights glowed warm. I had turned them on before leaving, not out of habit, but because I knew I'd come back. That was the difference now. I saw a final email from Noah waiting when I opened my inbox. "You've set a precedent, and you kept your name." A name. Not a price. Not a file number. A name. They'd listed their other property for sale. Not this one. This one wasn't for sale. It had been reclaimed,